Good afternoon. I feel very happy to be here to speak of the future, because when we speak of air transport, we're speaking of the future, of course. Now, I'll start by saying that even though we speak of future, I wonder if we can feel very optimistic, because if we look at the emissions of greenhouse gases, it's 2%, only 2% of the overall emissions of CO2. Why are we so concerned about 2%? Airports are very complicated. It's difficult to build and manufacture aircrafts. And what is important is growth. Well, growth. What we know is that air traffic will double in the next 15 years. We already have a very strong growth, as you can see here on this slide. We're going to double air traffic. Just to give you an idea, today we have 17,000 commercial aircrafts. We're going to have more than 30,000, and we'll have 1,500 international airports throughout the world. So this, I think, is one of the reasons why we in the air transport feel very concerned about the environment and what we can do about the greenhouse gas. Now, there's another reason which explains our commitment. If we look at this curve and we speak of growth, just to give you an idea what it looks like. For instance, on this slide, we see here that we have two main poles. We have North America and Europe. These are the two main boosters for air transport, and also transatlantic relationships. And growth depended upon these relations. Now, since the 90s, we have a very strong growth in Asia. So we have a third area which is now emerging. It's an emerging country or continent, and you can see here on this slide. In 2014, for instance, in India, we have 7 trips for each inhabitant, for 100 inhabitants, and in France we have 120, in North America 160 for 100 inhabitants. That means that if you have 7 trips for 100 inhabitants in India and a bit more in China, that means that there is a real growth of air transport. And in Asia, this is going to be boosted by the average social classes, because they want to travel more. Therefore, this growth is very significant. If we don't do more efforts, well, we're going to have 2, 4, 5% more emissions. So this is why we all have to work together hand in hand so as to avoid having more emissions. But there's another reason why, which explains our concern. A few months ago, I was at the Bourget Air Show, and we had a conference where we signed an agreement with KLM, the French industrialists, and the Paris airport, so as to avoid having more greenhouse gases. And Laurent Fabius quoted Ban Ki-moon, because we asked Ban Ki-moon, what can we do if we can't avoid mitigating these gases? And Ban Ki-moon said, we can't have another plan because we don't have another planet. We only have one planet. So this growth of aeronautic industry is something which concerns all of us. We don't have any kind of replacement solution. We have to do something right now. It's urgent. And if we want to mitigate the greenhouse gases, it's something we're all responsible and accountable for. These gases may increase, and therefore for future generations, for our children and grandchildren, we have to do something so as to preserve the planet. Now, what about air transport and air traffic? We started trying to reduce greenhouse effect through savings, for instance, of fuel, and since 1973 there has been a major effort performed. For instance, when you exploit an aircraft, 30% of the costs are due to fuel consumption. Therefore, since then, most of the manufacturers have tried to see how they could reduce these costs. And since the 60s, where we had 10 liters per 100 kilometers per seat, today, with a new generation of aircrafts, the 350, we have 2 liters. That means that we have very strongly reduced, brought down the consumption of fuel per passenger and per seat, which which is an incredible result. But this is not enough because as it stands today, growth is very strong. As I said before, traffic growth in the last 10 years accounts for 100% more. That means that we have two-folded the air traffic in terms of kilometers, distances performed, and also an increase of 30% of the overall amount of fuel which is now being consumed. Now, this is another graph which shows how we are committed and to this environmental strategy, and the French industrialists in the field of aeronautics and the Paris airport are all committed so as to bring this down. You see here on this slide that this is not only one point we have to work on. We have to work on different factors. It's the whole chain of factors or items we have to work on. I'm not going to go into the details of all the technological innovations that come up here and which are necessary. For instance, the materials we use, the components, which are composites with fiber, specific fibers, aerodynamics, the wings, sharklets, and so on. We have very many biofuels also, which are now being used. We have hybrid fuels. And this topic is a very technical, complex topic because we need more energetic fuels. And we don't have the same scope of possibilities in aeronautics as the one we have for transports on Earth or by land. So all this is very complex. Now, if we look at the airport in itself, what is going on? We're only a very small part of the overall story, in fact, because when we speak of greenhouse gases, it only accounts for 5% of the 2% I've mentioned previously. But you see that the Paris airport is 1 kilowatt hour per year. It's more or less what they consume in Rennes in terms of electricity, the same amount. Rennes, where we have 206,000 inhabitants, which are now trying to reduce the electricity consumption so as to bring down the greenhouse gases effect. This is why we're trying to take very many initiatives for that. What are we doing? Well, we have to have terminals which are I would say clean or low energy consumption buildings with neutral energies, if we can say that. We also have, in the last 10 years, tried to bring down the consumption of energy. And 50% of the electrical energy we use is green energy. In Orly, in the airport of Orly, we have a geothermic plant which produces 25% of the overall amount of heat we need. In Charles de Gaulle Airport, we also have a biomass power plant which also delivers 25% of the energy we use. Though these are technical solutions or options that we've started developing 10 years ago and which have really helped us to bring down, I would say, the overall consumption of energy and also has mitigated the greenhouse gases effect. Now, in terms of lighting, we are today changing, using LED, changing our lamps. With the digital revolution, we have what we call smart lighting. We're testing now lighting systems in aircrafts, which are digital systems. That means that they can be disconnected when you don't have any passengers on the aircraft. This is very important for us. We have to save more energy. But apart from all these technical measures that we are implementing, and apart from innovation, which is at the very heart of what we're doing, the most important part of the story is what I would call management. This is what I consider important. And in the French airports, we are going through a real revolution with our younger generations coming in. We are all convinced of the fact that we have to mitigate greenhouse effect gases, which is as important an issue as profitability and satisfaction of our customers. And we can bundle the three things. I'll give you an example which illustrates on this slide what we have been doing. A few years ago, we implemented what we call a system based on collaboration. It's a collaborative decision-making system, which really has started operating 5 years ago. What does this mean? That means that on an airport, you usually have three partners which are involved. To start with, you have civil aviation, stakeholders in charge of regulating air traffic, but you also have the descent of the aircraft, the circulation of aircrafts, and you also have airliners and aircraft managers. All these three companies have been working together but they always worked in a very silo kind of approach. That means that they had their specific norms, their specific legislations, but they did not work in a collaborative way in real time. And this collaborative decision-making system is a system which means or implies, and I'm just giving you a few ideas, bringing people together and experts, for instance, of these three different entities in real time so as to help them make the appropriate decisions. Here you see the screens on this wall. You have a complete wall covered with screens where you have all the computer systems, meteorological forecasts. All this works together. We have a real collaboration between all these stakeholders, and they work every day together and take decisions in real-time decisions. In Charles de Gaulle Airport, which is a huge airport, when the aircrafts have to start flying, there is a specific timetable for that, but it is always automatically calculated because most of the aircrafts have to queue before they take off, as you know. So this is a system which has not been very costly. We had the computers for that. We had the digital tools for that. We had the screens, but it was very different in terms of approach. It became a positive approach because for the airliner, this means that we have been saving 20% of time of aircraft circulating on the airport. And also we have mitigated the greenhouse effect gas. And it's very positive also for the passenger who is going to spend 10 minutes less in the aircraft queuing so as to get into the aircraft or get off the aircraft. So from a management point of view, this is a change which has profoundly modified the way we think and we act. This is what I would call positive economy for the management of airports. And even though if we only save, I would say 10%, which is a very modest figure, of our efforts, of the time we need, and the fuel we use, I think this is very positive because this means a new set of mind, and this is going to be the real asset for us when we are going to fight pollution and greenhouse gases. In all industries, we have to feel accountable for what we do. And I would like to quote Leonardo da Vinci, which I think was very revolutionary. We cannot call things assets if we're going to lose them. Thank you very much, Patrick.